the heat. We're talking about the U.S. presidential race and who might be America's next president. Bob, on the Republican side, the big name, Jeb Bush, another Bush in the White House.
Well, I was going to say, it's been a big name for a long time.
Right.
There are any number of people, and I'm among them, quite frankly, who wonder if in a nation of, 320 million people,
right,
that there are other families that might have candidates who might run. Right now, everybody is talking about this being another Bush-Clinton race, and that, in and of itself, is turning a lot of people off.
Okay, talking about that, I want to play you something that Martin O'Malley, the former governor of Maryland, he might be running for president. This is what he said. Let's watch this.
Let's be honest here. The presidency of the United States is not some crown to be passed between two families. It is an awesome and sacred trust that to be earned.
What do you make of that?
I think that O'Malley is getting at something that I think a lot of Americans are uncomfortable with, and that is that American politics are not supposed to be aristocratic, even though they it oftentimes is. But we like to not think of ourselves as having these royal families of politics, but of course we do, and the Clintons and Bushes are just the latest in a long line of them. But I think that a lot of Americans, particularly because a lot of Americans aren't really going to participate in the primary process, but when a lot of Americans realize that it might be Bush v. Clinton in summer of 2016, I think they're going to be really thrown off. And I do think that what O'Malley's getting at is a pretty powerful argument.
And I think, with the exception of Barack Obama, there's been a Bush and a Clinton in the White House since when? 1980?
1988.
1988. There you go. Okay. Andre, how will Russia see another Bush president?
I think, like I mentioned, it will remain to be seen what practical difference it makes. I've had the privilege of meeting in person both President George W. Bush and Hillary Clinton. In person, they are wonderful people. I'm all for Hillary Clinton as a woman to be an American president. But what I'm slightly worried about is that she is so captive to the rules of the American elections, that she wants to be more hawkish than the men around her, and that gives me pause, frankly.
Ivan, what do you make of what kind of foreign policy we'll have under another President Bush? I mean, he's already shown that he's taken a hardline stance in many issues, particularly Cuba.
Well, like I say, you can't always tell what they're going to do by their campaign rhetoric because, of course, international events are probably less predictable than domestic events, and therefore president has to improvise. Sometimes he has to flip-flop because it's harder when you're in the seat, of course, than it is to just chirp from the outside. And so I think, he could be pragmatic, or he could be like his brother and, kind of go hog wild in the intervention world. So it's hard to say at this point. He seems like a more sober character and more of an analyst than a shoot from the hip type of guy like his brother. But you never know when they get in office. It depends on who their advisors are, too. And the Republican Party has these high testosterone neoconservatives who seem to have a disproportionate share of the ears of the politician versus the actual people, the number of people that are involved being neoconservatives. But if they get a hold of the campaign, then of course he could he could be a real hawk. And I think Hillary will become a hawk for just what Andre said, that number one, she's a Democrat, and they always have to prove their national security. And she's a woman, and so she doesn't want to, she's got to outdo the men in being tough. And I would prefer that she didn't do that, but apparently that's probably what she's going to have to do.
Bob, the other big thing in American politics, especially when you're running for president, is the amount of money involved in this. And wouldn't someone like Jeb Bush have access to a lot of money?
Well, that is his strength. He is emerging as what we called earlier the establishment candidate in the Republican Party, and that means the one that appeals to who appeals to big money. And it seems to be lining up for Jeb Bush. On the other side, you have the people who are going for the cultural vote, the base, the religious conservatives, and all that kind of thing. But the accusation is made, and I think with some justification, that the United States is really now controlled by what some people might call the oligarchs in this country, that they, in fact, control the political process. And I think we've had a consensus here that when it comes to foreign policy, international policy, every president seems to be pretty much like his predecessor was or her predecessor was. Maybe another way of looking at this is that when it comes to international relations, no American president, no world leader, as a matter of fact, is really able to control what's happening. It's really, you can't really have long-term vision because too many things happen by surprise.
And it's more times than often, it's a response to what is happening more than anything else. Andre, you wanted to say?
Right. I just wanted to say that I did not really answer your question about Bush as a president. What I find interesting, and frankly, I'm much more used to asking these same questions than, as a journalist. And so I have a lot of friends whom I ask those questions of, who are, some of them, very conservative Americans. What I find interesting is that they assure me that their candidates really have no beef with Russia at this point and with Putin, and that some of them are actually cheering Putin on when he takes on President Obama.
Kyle, the point that Bob raised about money in politics in the United States, we've got to the stage now when just a few individuals on the Republican side, 2 individuals, the Koch brothers, can basically decide who's going to be in the White House, couldn't they?
Well, it's probably a bit of a stretch, but individual power donors are stronger than ever. And what's going to be interesting in this presidential race is you can have these individual mega donors essentially bankrolling candidates. We saw it in 2012 when Republicans Rick Santorum and Newt Gingrich were able to stay in the Republican presidential race against Mitt Romney, in large part because there was a single big donor behind both of them. And there's just more and more of those people coming in as I think wealthy people are going to realize that they can essentially spend unlimited amounts of money in support of these candidates. And so even trickling down to Senate and governor and House races, you're having these financial angels come in, propping up campaigns. You know, it's a new development. I mean, big money's always been a big deal in American politics, but you know, if you don't like money in politics, the problem is worse than ever.
You want to say something?
Well, yeah, I think that we should point out that the number of people who vote in the United States is abysmally low. And to the point that President Obama was musing out loud about possibly making voting mandatory. I wrote a column about this saying only if you allow people to vote for none of the above, because I think that that would be the person that most people in the United States would vote for. They're disgusted by politics, and a big reason for that is that they don't feel like they have a stake in the American political system anymore. It's controlled by just a few billionaires.
Ivan, could we see a surprise during this election? You know, if we kind of accept the conventional wisdom that it's going to be Hillary Clinton or Jeb Bush, I mean, could we see some kind of surprise which would knock Hillary out of the race or seriously dent her chances of winning?
Well, I mean, as you pointed out before, she hasn't handled recent events very well, but I think she's very strong. And usually it's the Democrats that give you the surprise and the Republicans that go back to their, you know, the one who lost last time, their front runner. But you could have both parties in this case do that, and I think more than likely it'll probably be Bush and Clinton again, the Bush and Clinton election again. But you know, of course, if something comes out and you know, the other candidates have still plenty of time to get in, but of course, you know, you have to raise money early now, and so she's got, you know, she's got the big lead, and I think people are scared of her. So I think that's a little bit doubtful. I would predict it's going to be Bush and Clinton whenever you know, when the dust settles, because you know, we've had the last 2 have been McCain and Romney, and they weren't liked by the conservatives in the Republican Party, yet they were the nominee, and Bush is not like that. Much by the conservatives, but I think he'll make it.
All right,
because
Kyle,
of the money.
Will we see President Obama play a role in the upcoming campaigns?
Well, the sitting president's approval rating is very important in an open seat presidential election. The president's approval rating is in kind of the mid to high 40s right now. If he drops to where he's around 40%, he's going to be a terrible burden for Hillary Clinton. But I think if Obama is where he is now, or even if he goes up maybe to 50% or so, then he becomes actually a help to Hillary Clinton. And so Obama looms large, and so does the economy.